This isn't about a particular person, but it's more about an incident. Beginning in 1870, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, built numerous inclined railways called inclines or planes to provide passenger service to workers traveling the steep hills to their homes and for freight. There were 24 of them built in the 19th century, but currently only 2 are still operating, the Monongahela Incline and the Duquesne Incline. This story is about the St. Clair Incline, which was also called the 22nd Street Incline. It was built in 1886 and decommissioned about 1932. At the lower end, it was in the neighborhood of the South Side Flats at Josephine Street near Greeley Street. At the upper end, it was in the neighborhood of the South Side Slopes at Salisbury Street between Fernleaf and Sterling Streets. It had a rise of 361 feet and it was 260 feet in length. There were 2 cars, so one went up and one went down, or they both went up depending on, the traffic. It was owned by the St. Clair Plane Company. April 6th, 1909 was a workday and a Tuesday. There was always a rush of employees of the glass factory for the first car. The factory hands quit at 2:45 a.m. and hurried to the incline. There were 9 glass factory employees and 1 stranger in the cab that morning. The first trip began at 3 a.m., and this is when the accident occurred. The right-hand car was occupied by 10 men and boys who were returning to their homes from work. They had worked in the Southside Glass Houses or the D.O. Cunningham Glass Factory. Frequently, there were 50 men and boys on the car, but several persons who generally take the car in that hour of the morning were delayed and missed it. 6 of the passengers this day were teenagers, while 4 ranged in age from 35 to 45. While the upbound car was in motion, the engineer, Jesse J. Britton, became faint and stepped to the window of his cab for air. Failing to shut off the power, he permitted the cars to run, and when the upbound car struck the bumping block at the top of the plane, the cable snapped, and the car started on its mad flight to the bottom of the plane, 2,100 feet below. Unmindful of the danger, the occupants of the car were chatting and joking when the landing station was struck. They did not pay attention to getting off the car until it had come to a full stop, but the moment they realized the car was on a downward bound, there was a wild scramble to get off. While passing under the Mission Street Bridge, 100 feet from the bottom of the plane, no, I don't think that's right. I think that was in the newspaper, but I think Frank Bradle, aged 18, he jumped from the car and he was first, so he was only like 50 feet down. But that was the signal. His jumping was a signal for 3 other boys, and they jumped too. Just a short distance above the lower station, the runaway car jumped the track and took a course to the left and crashed into the empty car on the left-hand track at the bottom. And it crushed it to splinters. But fortunately, the left-hand car was unoccupied. All the occupants in the right-hand car were caught in the wreckage, and it took some time for the rescuers to remove them all. One of the adults in the car was Christian Neurer, age 38, and he stated that he didn't notice anything until the car started down the hill, and he remembered that it had bumped into the landing stage at the top of the incline, but no one else noticed it. He said as soon as we started down the hill, he knew something was wrong, and he told everyone to lie down on the floor. He said it didn't work, but that he thought it would save them. In fact, it did. It kept them from getting worse concussions and things. 16-year-old Nick Schmidt said that all he could remember was fire and ashes and dust and that everyone was scared when the car started down the hill, but no one said anything except Christian Yor. Schmidt said that they all laid down when they were told, but when they hit the bottom, everything seemed to go to pieces. Most of them were knocked out, probably. Christian Yor was bruised about the body. Someone else said that Herman Weidenheif, aged 45, persuaded most of the passengers to remain in the car instead of taking chances by jumping to safety. The crash of the cars at the foot of the incline was heard for blocks, and people came running at once from every direction. Patrolman Arthur Schwalm, he'd heard the crash, and he was at the top, patrolling his beat at the head of the incline. He noticed the car was coming to the end of its trip, and without slackening its speed. He then came over, and just as the car was nearing the top, Schwalm says that he saw Engineer Britton appear at the window and exclaim, "My God, I want air." Then the engineer fell over in a faint. Schwalm ran to the station at the top of the hill, and there he found Engineer Britton lying unconscious in his box. Schwalm immediately telephoned the lower station, but received no word, as the engineer at the bottom of the hill, Robert Feldmeyer, was busy trying to take care of the injured. Schwalm revived the engineer, Britton, who stated that he could remember nothing of the accident after starting the cars, other than that he felt faint and reached over to the window to take a breath of fresh air. Police Lieutenant Charles McAfee, en route to his home at the bottom, heard the crash and, learning of the accident, summoned the engine company number 12. These men, under the command of Captain Charles Vogel, did valiant work in cutting the injured men from the debris. Broken timbers were piled upon each other, and heavy cable lines twisted on the ground. The people gathered around the splintered cars spoke almost in whispers because it looked so tragic. The rescuers found Nick Schmidt, aged 16 years, underneath the stove, with all of the breath and almost all of the life knocked out of him. He had hurt his left arm, chest, and shoulder. The patrol wagon from the Southside station and an ambulance from the Southside hospital were summoned, and the injured were carried to the hospital. As soon as the patrol wagon took away those who had remained in the car, the men started up the hill and found those who had jumped. The rescuing party, in its search along the track, found the 4 boys. 2 of the 4 boys who jumped had died. Those were Arthur Miller and Albert Kinkenberger, both aged 16 years. Arthur Miller lived a few doors away from St. Joseph's Church on Ormsby Street and was taken home. His mother blamed herself for the accident to a certain extent because the boy had wanted to leave his work at the glass house, and the day before had been out all day trying to get another position someplace else. He was tired last night and he wanted to stay home, but his mother insisted that he go to work. Her grief was because she was afraid he was going to get laid off. Her grief was twice as intense because of the knowledge that she had compelled him to go. He had a premonition of disaster, and he feared to go to work, but she was afraid he would be dismissed if he remained away. The other 2 teenagers who had jumped were Frank Bradel, aged 18, and William Paul, aged 19. They were taken to the Southside Hospital with serious injuries. They lived. Bradel was badly cut and bruised about the body, and Paul, he had a fractured skull and injured left shoulder. Bradel later said that he was riding on the front platform of the car, and when the car struck the station, it hit hard, and there was a cloud of dust. He noticed the car going backward. He then looked down and he saw the cables were broken, and he jumped. He was found 50 feet from the top of the inclined plane, and they took him to his house, where he was seen by a doctor for cuts and bruises. Well, one newspaper said they took him to the hospital, and another one said they took him to his house, so Either way, he lived. Theodore Huber, age 35, was so bruised that he had his head, arms, and legs bandaged so that he was almost unable to move. He had a bad head injury. Herman Weidenheift, age 45, had his hand hurt badly and his face was cut and bruised, but he was able to go to the doctor by himself. Griffith Davis was 18 years old, and he had his left arm broken and he was badly cut and gashed on the left side. And Charles Marlowe was 41, and he was bruised about the body and arms and taken home. William S. Hughes, the president of the Incline Company, who was confined to his home by rheumatism, stated, "We have men out everywhere trying to get all the information we can. We have run the plane for 21 years, and this is the first serious accident we've ever had. The machinery was in good condition, and we had trustworthy men working, and we never thought such an accident would occur. We had all kinds of machinery which we thought would render the passengers immune from accident, and imagined that we had prepared for everything, but it seems that we have not." When asked if he'd ever heard that engineer Jesse Britton was subject to fainting, he seemed greatly surprised. "Why no," he said. "If that was so, I never heard it. He had served us long and faithfully, and we knew we could rely on him." The engineer, Jesse J. Britton, was badly broken up over the accident. He said, "I would rather have been killed myself than have had anyone else killed. I had just started the cars, and the upper one had gone only a few yards when I felt this fainting spell come over me. I stepped to a window and raised it and felt revived by the fresh air. In the meantime, the cars kept going. I walked over to the brakes, intending to slow down the cars, and there I fainted and fell. I believe that when I fell, I must have thrown the switch clear open, and this allowed the cars to run down." Britton was cut and bruised about the face after he fainted, and the car ascending the incline having crashed into the cabin where he had been lying. He was also weakened by nervous strain. The ticket seller at the office of the route at the foot of the incline, Robert Feldmeyer, was badly broken up over the affair. "I don't know how it happened," he said. "The engineer rang the bell all right, and the car started up the incline, and then when the empty car reached here, I heard it bump hard. I looked up, and I saw the other car coming down full speed. I ran out onto the street, and then came the crash. Oh, it is terrible," he said, his hands trembling as he pressed them against his eyes. An examination of the plane showed that the front car crashed into the bumpers and then against the head of the incline. The rope folded from the clamps and dropped out. The two lower trucks left the rails, as shown by the breaking of ties and pulleys, for a third of the distance from the top. This helped save the lives of those who lived by checking the momentum of the car, slowing it down. A jury later found that loose clamps were the cause of the accident, as the clamps were not sufficiently tight to prevent the cable from slipping through the drawbar on the car. This incident compelled all incline passenger planes to take decent measures for public safety. The chief deputy coroner said every incline should install automatic stops and have a second man at the top, because anytime anybody could have a heart attack at any time, and there's just no telling. So that little accident had a profound effect, at least on the 10 people that were riding the car, and the 2 engineers, and the 2 patrolmen, one at the top and one at the bottom, and other rescuers from engine company number 12. It was 1909. I'm sure there's 2 inclines still going, as I had said, the Monongahela and the Duquesne inclines, and I'm sure they're you know, they're up to code safe today because that was over 100 years ago. So don't be afraid to visit. There's a Clair Incline Museum in Pittsburgh. And yeah, I hope you get a chance to go out there and see it. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I wanted to share something else with you. I have found that when I was at that Postcard meeting, they told me about a website called postcrossing.com, and it's where you can send postcards. You sign up and then you send postcards to other people that do the same thing, and they send you postcards. And so I happen to have picked up a few postcards for the fun of it. I picked up this one. It's of a lady in a fur coat in some kind of tropical setting, because there's these spiky plants in the background. So I thought that was fascinating that one would be wearing a coat. So, a fur coat. It looks like it's lined with mink or something, and she's wearing it in Florida? I mean, I don't know. So anyway, this is going to Germany, and I just like the incongruity of that one. And this one is just a pretty one. Now, I had gotten to the end and I had 15 postcards picked out, and he said to me, pick out a 16th, make it an even amount. So I picked one out at random, and it was a cartoon. I didn't like it. I picked another one out, and I got this one. And this is Oxford Street, Magnolias in Bloom, Rochester, New York. And for the fun of it, I'm going to send this one to a lady in Canada.